The fourth part of this introduction to Kant's ethics deals with the problem of the conflict of duties, which we already encountered in the last video with the example of the honest mother. What happens when two duties conflict? For example, the duty to tell the truth and the duty to help. We also get to know a new formula of the categorical imperative, the end in itself formula. We start with a short recap of the content from the last video, which dealt with the universal law formula of the categorical imperative. According to Kant, man is both a rational being and a sensory being. Only if reason alone, respect for the moral law, determines the will, is it an action from duty, and only actions from duty are moral according to Kant. The moral law corresponds to the categorical imperative. This is expressed in the universal law formula. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Alex's mother from the last clip acted only rationally and therefore told the truth to the drug dealers who were looking for her son. Because the maxim, lie if it gets you out of an unpleasant situation, cannot be intended as a universal law, neither her inclinations, the love for her son, nor the expected unpleasant consequences played a role in her decision to tell the truth. Besides the duty to tell the truth, didn't the mother also have a duty to help her son by lying? Kant distinguishes between perfect and imperfect duties. Perfect duties are a strict form of obligation that does not allow for any exceptions. The universalization question here is, can a certain maxim be wanted and thought of as a universal law without contradiction? Is there no logical contradiction when the maxim is universalized? Imperfect duties are a milder form of obligation. The universalization question here is, can a certain maxim be wanted as a universal law? According to Kant, in the event of a conflict of duties, we must give greater consideration to the perfect duties. Kant himself gives some examples of perfect and imperfect duties and again distinguishes between duties to oneself and duties towards others. Preserving your life, that is not killing yourself, even though you are facing many difficulties, is a perfect duty to yourself. The maxim, kill yourself if you can avoid trouble by doing so, cannot be thought of as a universal law without contradiction. According to Kant, avoiding difficulties serves to promote life, whereas ending life logically contradicts this principle. A weaker duty, Kant speaks of imperfect duty, is the duty to develop one's own abilities or talents. One cannot want people not to realize their talents. However, such a law would not be illogical and theoretically conceivable. We have already discussed a perfect duty towards others in detail in the last two videos. It is about the prohibition of breaking promises. The maxim, lie if you can get out of an unpleasant situation, can not only not be wanted as a universal law, it cannot even be thought of. Since the principle of lying is based on the principle of truthfulness, that is, it only works if I assume that the other person is telling the truth, such a universal law of lying would destroy the maxim itself. Lying would no longer be possible. Kant cites the duty to help others as an example of an imperfect duty towards others. I cannot want no one to help others, but such a universal law would be conceivable without contradiction. As a reminder, according to Kant, if several duties arise simultaneously but contradict each other, that is in the case of a conflict of duties, the perfect duties take precedence over the imperfect duties. Back to Alex's mother again. Her will is determined neither by inclinations nor by expected consequences, but solely by respect for the moral law, the categorical imperative. Alex's mother tells the drug dealers the truth, even though she loves her son and fears negative consequences. It is an action from duty. In the conflict of duties between the perfect duty to tell the truth and the imperfect duty to help her son by lying, the perfect duty takes precedence. Perhaps you were not 100% convinced by Kant's argumentation earlier on the prohibition of suicide. In addition to the universal law formula, another important formula of the categorical imperative can be used for such cases. In addition to the universal law formula, act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Kant also formulates the end in itself formula of the categorical imperative. This reads, Act in such a way that you always use humanity, both in your person and in the person of everyone else, as an end in itself, never merely as a means. It is therefore forbidden to instrumentalize oneself or other people, to misuse them solely as a means. It is immediately obvious that this formula prohibits suicide. When I kill myself, I use myself only as a means and not as an end in itself. How does Kant justify this formula? Why should man always be used as an end in himself and never just as a means? The reason for the prohibition of instrumentalization is human dignity. Kant bases this on his view of humanity. Due to their reason, human beings have autonomy. They can freely set their own purposes. This ability is the basis of their dignity. If I treat human beings only as a means and not as an end in themselves, I violate their dignity. Would the end in itself formula of the categorical imperative allow us to lie in order to get out of an unpleasant situation? No, because when I lie to someone, I'm only using them as a means, in this case, to get out of an unpleasant situation, and not as an end in itself. This would violate their dignity. Now you know everything important about Kant's ethics. You know Kant's conception of man, the different types of action, and two important formulas of the categorical imperative. Are you convinced by Kant's ethics? Do you think the categorical imperative makes sense? The last episode in this series deals with the advantages and disadvantages of Kant's ethics.